Started, everyone. And let me just check the chat. If this is your first time in Zoom, you just go down the bottom. You can add a chat. Just want to welcome everybody to our session today, How to Stay Mentally Tough and Resilient in Challenging Times. And want to especially welcome everybody from HCAM TV in Hopkinton, Massachusetts, which is carrying this live, and everybody from Hopkinton Parks and Rec. And we've got people actually from all over the country, people that have run into me and been at my various seminars I've done. We get someone from out in California and the Midwest and lots of different places. And what's fascinating is we're all struggling with the same thing now. We're all struggling with this virus and being at home and the social distancing. But definitely, we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to not make things worse than they already have to be. I mean, definitely this is stressful, and you have to admit it's stressful, and it's one of the worst things to say to somebody is you shouldn't feel that way. But I mean, at some point, we have to ask ourselves, at what point are we making it worse than it has to be? And definitely got to ask yourself better questions with this. And there's just some common sense things we need to do. Like, I love my little stopwatch here. Like, I have to have a plan for the day. I mean, if I don't have a plan for the day, if I don't have something that I can cross out with this extra time being at home, I'm just going to go insane. I notice for me that if I don't write it down in advance, that I don't give myself the credit for it. And then if I don't give myself the credit for it, I notice I don't give myself a chance to relax or permission to relax or really just rest or maybe binge on a Netflix show or something. So I got to do something with the time. And I just figured out there's 1,440 minutes a day. And if I sleep 8 hours, I'm awake for 960. So if I'm awake for 960 minutes, is there any reason why I can't spend 30 on one long-term goal and 30 on something else and 30 on C, or 30 on A, 30 on B, 30 on C? And then I just cross these things off like I'm lifting weights. I make like a grunt sound. Just to give myself some sense of satisfaction here. Otherwise, you're just going to go insane. The worst thing is just to wake up and do whatever and not to have any plan, because you're just not going to get any sense of satisfaction with that. The other thing I think we need to be careful of is the news and over consuming things. At one point, I signed up for text alerts with the Governor Baker here out in Massachusetts, but I found that was just really increasing my stress level. I don't need a text and all these updates. I think we really should limit ourselves to the news maybe 3 times a day, once in the morning, midday, and later on in the day, and really just look at credible sources. Just look at the Centers for Disease Control or the National Institutes of Health or the World Health Organization. A lot of these internet sites, they get their ratings and they get their revenue through page clicks. And a lot of these headlines are really just clickbait, and they want to draw you in and they want you to click on them. And they're really designed to scare us or enrage us. And it's just not good for our stress level. But the other thing we need to do to survive during these challenging times and to be tougher is we need to ask ourselves better questions. And I'm not going to go around the room now. I've been in one of these Zoom meetings earlier in the week where the instructor was going around the room and asking everybody how they're surviving with the coronavirus. And I look at the clock, and 45 minutes has gone by, and that's not really what I'm looking for. I just prefer instructors that have a perspective and have something they want to share. So let's just get right into it. And definitely some better questions. We want to avoid certain questions. Has the question there you can see on the screen there, which should come up in a little minute. It'll be a little larger, but OMG and all the explanation points, and oh my God, and how bad is it, and how bad is it, and how bad is it. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people that are, kind of experts in that and getting involved in that and sharing that. But instead, we want to kind of move towards solutions here. And we want to see, avoiding this question, the how bad is it? We know it's bad, but I mean, your brain is like the most sophisticated computer in the world, and it's going to answer any question that you put out there. And if you put out this question, you put out a poor question, you're definitely going to get poor answers. But we need to start moving towards solutions and asking ourselves, what can I do that's under my control? It's not what the government can do, or my governor, or the mayor, or the superintendent of the school system, but what can I do that's under my control to at least make it a little better? And this is why I'm talking about a plan and having a plan. And I just love the phrase, we just got to accept the fact that a lot of the stuff that happens to us in life, it's just not in our control. But when we can just admit powerlessness and just say, I am powerless over this, I'm powerless over that. I mean, really, if you think about it, right now we're all sitting on a rock, which is hurtling around an exploding star at about 50,000 miles an hour. I mean, trying to control that is just kind of exhausting. But I think some of us need to do a better job at just admitting powerlessness. I am just powerless over this. And let's look at what we can control, us, our responses, what we think about, what we ruminate on, what we talk about, what we give our energy to. But, I've just been trying to get a grip, just trying to get a grip in my life. But some of us need to do a better job of just letting go. And I just love the phrase, I can't control the direction of the wind. All I can do is adjust my sail. Like, you never hear of a sailor out in a sailboat complaining about the wind. No, they just go ahead and adjust the sail. And we definitely need to adjust our sails nowadays. And great question to ask yourself is, being at home due to the coronavirus gives me a chance to blank. What does it give you a chance to do? And if you can go ahead and type in your answer here, just scroll down towards the bottom and you'll see there should be a button that says chat or participants. And I'd love to see some of the positive responses. For some of us are saying it's giving us a chance to slow down, play some board games, have some quality time with our kids. Quality time is not only when you're physically there, but you're mentally there as well. And also, I think it's a great opportunity this spring to be more mindful, to learn how to become mentally tougher. Because one thing you're definitely going to notice being at home during this time is all your thoughts and this dialogue. And, it's really can be difficult. It's fascinating. And just looking at some of the chat, and we'll look at some of this and see if I can open it up. I'll come back to that in just a few minutes. But, here's one sample schedule that was passed around our school system. I got some kind of structure for these kids, some kind of structure for your day. Getting up at 9, the morning walk from 9 to 10, academic time, creative time, lunch, chore time. And then there was one exasperated mother who just crossed us out and just said, the heck with it. You know what? I'm just going to try keep these kids alive while also working from home and pray they don't start fighting while I'm on a conference call. It's probably a little more realistic. Some people had some other funny ones in this. Just said, iPad time, go on your iPad, don't bother me. But, I think it's a great exercise for the kids just to get up and make their bed, first of all. And I got another friend here in Hopkinton, Rebecca Hearn, who said, you know what, I'm doing some homeschooling for these kids. And you know what the homeschooling is going to be? It's going to be about how to use the dryer, how to do the laundry. This is how you turn the big knob to normal. This is step 4. This is step 5. And I just love this. She said, it's great. We're finally getting to these life skills before they move on to college, because her daughter now is in 5th grade or 7th grade, I believe. And just, you got to find the silver lining. You have to be your own spin master. And you'll see this with politics later on this year in the election. Everybody's trying to spin things and get it in the favorable light, but you almost need to play a game with yourself. This is like a mental game, and turning the spin around to find the positive, to find the silver lining in it, also known as reframing. And then the second question we want to ask ourselves is, what can you stop doing that just makes things worse than it already has to be? And there's lots of people that are making things worse than they have to be. I think even with certain friends or certain family members or certain people that we interact with, I think it's a great idea just to take your emotional temperature when you're around certain people. And I think there's some people we really need to detach from. But I already talked about avoiding the news, avoiding the pack mentality. Just because people are panicking over toilet paper doesn't mean I need to panic. It's just this herd mentality, which is just crazy. But I think the great thing to do is just draw a line and say, at what point is my focus on this now becoming counterproductive? And a lot of people, they responded in the registration form and said, what's the most challenging thing for you in this situation? And one here had a concern for elderly parents, keeping up with work challenges, the stress of the constant news, and inadequate prep by the feds. You can definitely detach yourself from the constant news. Like I said, twice or 3 times a day at the most. I mean, if it's a real emergency, your phone is going to go off, like it did in Hawaii. Said, incoming missiles was a mistake, but definitely someone will grab you. You don't have to keep obsessively checking the news. Staying focused on important tasks. I'm full of worry about not catching COVID-19, although that is certainly possible, but the economic toll, uncertainty, and bad news. Worried about my husband, myself, and my 99-year-old mom. Anxiety, trying not to go stir crazy and stress about bills, keeping focused, staying present. But ask yourself, there's a time to plan, there's a time to get ready. Preparation is good, and it's preparing for things and making plans. But worry is really just this mental habit. Worry is also known as the most common form of mental illness. But, worry is just this mental habit, this things that we do that doesn't really get us anywhere, but causes us to have negative emotions. But ask yourself, I've made my plan. I've written things down. I've made my columns. I made my checklist. Now, enough is enough. I'm not going to draw my line in the sand. And if I focus on this anymore, it's just counterproductive. It's just not helping me anymore. And everybody really needs to find the line about worrying about your parents, worrying about the finances, worrying about getting the virus, and just draw your various lines and say, I can't make myself sick, because the problem is this suppresses our immune system. This suppresses the white blood cells. So the more stressed out you are, the more stressed out you allow yourself to get, the less you're going to be able to fight off any invaders or any viruses. So I'm not trying to deny the emotion. We're emotional beings. Feel the emotions, work through it. Hopefully feel it, express it, and hopefully someone will validate it that you're expressing it to, and then hopefully that will be able to dissipate. But I'm talking about what percentage of your stress or anxiety is self-created, self-inflicted, or self-induced. If we can just dial that part down a little bit, we'll all be much better off. So what can we do? Well, we can navigate the noise. We can navigate the mental noise, and we think about 50,000 thoughts a day. And it's really going to be key for every one of us this spring to navigate the noise, to get better at this. And this is all based on my new book, which just came out, called Mind Right, Navigate the Noise: How to Deal with Your Internal Fake News for Success, Resiliency, Mental Toughness, and Peace of Mind. And I'll put the Amazon link to this in the chat in a little bit for better retention and application if you want to get more deeply into this. But really just a very important life skill. And we have to realize that the brain makes a wonderful servant, but a terrible master. You can't let your brain be the master. What we need to do is divide the mind and the brain. We need to use our minds to train our brains. I don't know if I'd use the word mentally weak, but unfortunately, there's a lot of people that are just tortured by their own thoughts. The brain starts to come up with a train of thought, and they allow that to suck them down in it, and can turn a low grade, anxiety to a clinical one, or like a low grade depression to a clinical one. And we just can't allow our brain to take us down these roads. And we need a new perspective with this. And the first perspective with this, and I want to get deeper with this because this is called mental toughness. And I want to get under the surface and not just talk about the common sense things that we can do to respond to the virus. But I think we all need to understand why you can't trust your brain, and why your brain can be such a jerk to you. And when you really look at this, I think you'll have a new perspective and a new way of just looking at the thoughts that your brain creates. And to really do this, you have to go inside the numbers. And those of you that got the handout that I sent, unless you registered just in the last 15 minutes, you should have got this. You don't have to print out the whole thing, but it's a great reference. And you have this slide there in the handout. And this just basically shows us, and let me just stop sharing for a minute so you can see me even a little better. Just looking at the first version of mankind was called a hominid, I should say, that had about a brain about 1/3 of our current size. But we forget that we've been walking on this earth for 4 million years. 4 million. And then you look at, as we evolve very, very slowly, is how the evolution works. We evolve through genetic mutations. I mean, there is this CRISPR device now. We can do the gene editing, but that's not really considered to be ethical for human beings at this point. But certainly we evolve very slowly, and we've evolved very slowly over the 4 million years. And if you think about it, the latest version of mankind, called the Homo sapiens sapien, was really getting a major foothold about 40,000 years ago. There certainly was Neanderthals back then as well, but that's when our current brain made its debut, 40,000 years ago versus 4 million. So if you look at the math at that, that's the 1%. So from an evolutionary perspective, this brain we have now is cutting edge. But looking at the ratio of human technological innovation, we've been evolving technologically, and our civilization has also been evolving very slowly over the 4 million years. As you see on that image there, we developed stone tools, and then we had other tools and swords, and we just developed fire actually about 300,000 years ago. So our human evolution, our gene evolution, it's very slow but steady line that looks like this. And then our human technological evolution over the 4 million years, very slow but steady line, until we had the scientific revolution. The scientific revolution just happened about 500 years ago. Up until that point, It was felt that any knowledge that was important was already known by the great elders. It was all already in the great scrolls. And how dare you question the high priest and the elders and everything? Just about 500 years ago, we started to question things and use the scientific method and ask ourselves, is the earth flat? Is the earth the center of the universe? And use the scientific method of evidence, reasoning, discovery, and drawing conclusions. So the human technological change and innovation has been a very slow line. Just until the last 500 years, it went straight up. So if you fell asleep in the year 500 BC and woke up 500 years later in the year 0 AD, the earth would pretty much look the same. There might have been some innovations, but still wooden ships. And if you fell asleep 500 years later, woke up at 500 AD, if you woke up at 1000 AD, if you woke up at 1500 AD, the world would basically look the same. But just imagine the difference of the ratio of change if you woke up, if you fell asleep in the year 1500 AD and woke up in the year 2000. With all the skyscrapers and the airplanes and the telephones, you'd think you're on a foreign planet. So my point is, our brains have not been able to keep up. Over the 4 million years, our brains have been able to keep up, and our brains have been evolving as we've been evolving just up until the last 500 years. So our brains are in desperate need of an update from the App Store. Our brains are in desperate need of a new operating system, but it's just not forthcoming. It's going to take hundreds of years. So our brains, when they made their debut 40,000 years ago in the Stone Age, the likelihood of sudden and violent death was so prominent. So our brains are doing an outdated, obsolete job. And guess what that outdated, obsolete job is? It's keeping us safe from physical danger. And the limbic system, the older parts of our brain and our amygdalas specifically, are looking for something to fear. They're looking for something to obsess over because they want to keep us out of danger. And this virus is, actually a perfect storm for this. And the brain loves to get going on this. So the brain is actually not so interested in the quality of your life. And this is why our brain has a negativity bias. It's much more biased on what's going wrong or what could be going wrong. And the default state of our brain is spontaneous wandering, just spontaneous wandering on whatever. But unfortunately, what it's wandering on, and if you look at that page in the book and the negativity bias, and unfortunately, 77% of what the average person thinks about is just negative or counterproductive. It just works against us. Only 23% is positive or uplifting and works for us. And this is just the average person. Your particular percentage might be different, but this could be measured with biofeedback mechanisms. Every thought that we have, that we entertain with emotion, creates a certain physical reaction in the body with heart rate and pulse and respirations. And this can all be measured. So still on page 1 here of this handout, and you have these questions. So your brain is speculating and it's spontaneous wandering. And unfortunately, it's speculating on what could go wrong. And this is vital to the brain, vital information for the brain. What could go wrong? Or what is wrong with this picture? Or what's wrong with you right now? What's wrong with your life? Or what's wrong with the room you're in? Or what's wrong with your job? And it's vital for the brain to speculate on this because the answer to this question is what? Well, the answer to this question is life or death. That according to your current mental equipment, the answer on the question, what's wrong with this picture, is life or death. And it's speculating on that, and it's ruminating on that, and it is wandering on that because it's still doing this outdated, obsolete job. So we're still getting a life or death response. We're still getting cortisol released from our amygdala. We're still getting major blood rushing to our major muscle groups. Like, do I need more blood flow to my thigh muscles to read my 300 emails? No, I mean, is that a good use of my energy? The problem is when the limbic system is online, then the prefrontal cortex here, right above the eyebrows, the part of the brain that is better with decision making and reasoning and rational thinking, is offline because the brain is very differential seniority. So the older parts of the brain take seniority. So I'm not able to think very well. I'm not able to process information. The blood is flowing to my thigh muscles when I say, oh my God, OMG, I got 300 emails, or I got to deal with this virus. I just can't think that well. So we're still getting this life or death response. The only thing that's changed, unless you live in Syria or unless you live in a war zone, but the only thing that's changed is the answer to the question is no longer life or death. It's really a mortgage that has to be paid. It's a virus that has to be dealt with. It's financial concerns. It's family concerns. The problem is, and the sad answer to this is, what's going right and what is good and what is awesome in your life, unfortunately, is not what to your brain? Well, it's not relevant. It's not relevant to your brain. It's not relevant to its mission. This is what's meant by the bias towards the negativity, because there's too much information for the brain to take in. There's too much stimulation. So it's going to exclude. The brain is really an exclusion creature. It can't take it all in at once. So it's going to exclude some stuff and just focusing on what's relevant to its mission. And what's relevant to its mission is preparing for the doom and gloom and what could go wrong. And that's really sad. And the brain doesn't care about the quality of your life. The more anxious you are, the more vigilant you are, the more you're like a squirrel grabbing an acorn with your head on the swivel looking for enemies. That's great, according to your brain, because that gives your brain a better chance to fulfill its mission. Your brain doesn't want you to be chilled. Your brain doesn't want you to be relaxed, because then, it wouldn't have as much better chance to fulfill the mission. So it wants you to be uptight. It wants you to be anxious. It's also vital to speculate on who's mad at you and conspiracy theories, because according to your brain, we're all living in a hunter-gatherer group. And the problem with being in the hunter-gatherer group is that if you're thrown out of the group, then it means instant death. So the brain is very interested on who's angry with you and who might be angry with you, and if you're not doing your share of the work, and it's got all these various things that it wants to focus on. So we should be able to discredit the brain a little more. Well, the first really goal for navigating the noise is just to see it as noise. Now, those of you that are older than the age of 40, you might remember the old television sets that didn't have the cable jacks and everything. They had the rabbit ears where there might be some static on the screen. And, we wouldn't stare at the static, we'd stare at the show we wanted to watch. We should just kind of left the static be in the background. And that's really what we should do with our noise, is let it be in the background. But even Bill Belichick with the Patriots has outside of the locker room a big sign that says, ignore the noise, ignore all the speculation from the media. This is the media's job, is to draw up speculation, to get people excited, get people angry, and there's never going to be a time where they're not going to print the newspaper, or they're not going to run the nightly news and say there's no news today. It has to come up with something. So understand, your brain has to come up with something that's wrong with your life. That's its job, is to come up with the negativity. So the sign that the Patriots have outside the locker room, ignore the noise. Well, you're not going to ignore something that you feel as though is important. You feel as though it's worthy of your analysis. So you have to take it with a grain of salt and understand there's the mind and the brain. And you're not the thinker. You're not the creator of your thoughts. The brain is. But what you are is the executive producer and the director who decides which thoughts you're going to entertain, which thoughts you're going to give energy to. And really, the gold standard with this, with navigating the noise, is to develop a different relationship with your thoughts, a different relationship with everything that's going on with your mind. And let's look at trying to get into, let me stop the share for a minute and see, looking at our bodies, either not that the brain is separate. Autoimmune bias, negativity, spend quality time with the kids. Good. And let's go back into the share again. If you have any questions, go ahead and add it down there in the bottom of the chat. And absolutely. And let's look at what's wrong with that picture. So how mindful are you is one thing that we can do here. Is how aware are you of what's going on? If you're not aware of it, then you'll let it needle you, and you'll let it cause you self-created stress and anxiety and depression. But really, one of the first elements to this, to getting better at this, is just saying, oh, there it goes. That's my brain again coming up with these thoughts, or there you go again, or there's another thought. But if you're not aware of it, you can't change anything that you're not aware of. And really, a good definition of mindfulness is just to notice the dialogue, notice the noise, notice the thoughts non-judgmentally, not getting sucked into them. There's other definitions of mindfulness which really revolve around being in the present moment, like mindful eating, being aware of the food you're eating instead of shoving it down. I'm guilty of eating a little too fast. Taking a mindful walk, noticing the birds, noticing the nature, hearing the sounds, smelling the smells. But mindfulness with mental toughness is just being aware of the dialogue. And do you hear what you're thinking? How often do you think about what you think about, which is an interesting question. So I did put a page on the handout there, and I'll send it if you're watching from Hopkinton HCAM TV live. I can get that to Jim, and we can get that handout to you. But there is a page there on page 2 where just a whole list of common negative thoughts from I'm going to lose my house. I'm going to live out in the street. This virus is going to ruin my life. I don't make enough money. I don't have any friends. Why do I look this old? And just little checkoffs of just common negative thoughts that people can get sucked into or entertain on page number 2 there. And you might have some other ones that aren't on that sheet, but the question was, how often do you think these things? Seldom, sometimes, or frequently. And that's a good little self-analysis and self-checkup. But we really just have to ask ourselves, what is a thought anyway? Well, my best definition for a thought, which I've been using the last 5 or 6 years or so, is a thought is simply just a brain secretion. Thank God we have them, because otherwise we'd be brain dead. But we have electrical activity going on in our brain. We have chemical activity going on in our brain. But a thought is just a secretion of your brain, just a brain secretion. And that's its job, is to come up with thoughts. And again, understand and grasp that your brain is doing an outdated, obsolete job that's no longer needed anymore. So a thought is just a thought is a thought. Just because you think it doesn't mean it's the truth. Just because you think it doesn't mean you have to analyze it. And really the best thing to describe it is, a lot of people say, "Well, I'm feeling upset." And you should know, I'm having some upsetting thoughts, or I'm feeling stressed. Well, I'm having some stressful thoughts, and don't let it draw conclusions. Like, don't say something like, I think he's mad at me, or I think she's mad at me, or I think that. Just say, I'm having thoughts that he's mad at me, or I'm having thoughts that she's mad at me, because that's really what it is. It's not that you have this thing or you have these problem. You have this problem. Most of the time, it's really just thoughts. And we have about, how many do we have a day? Well, we have about 50,000 thoughts a day. And I showed you the sad stats that 77% of which are negative or counterproductive. So that's not good. And at least half of our thoughts are about something other than what's happening right now. They're about the past, or they're about the future. So we want to be mentally tougher. And we want to have more in charge of what's going on here. I don't think I'd use the phrase control your thoughts, because that's really kind of exhausting. Controlling 50,000 thoughts certainly sounds exhausting. But I think, again, the goal is, first of all, to be able to ignore it, just to see it as not important, see it as a obsolete job of your brain. But when it starts to needle you, when it starts to cause you stress, really the best thing and the best characteristic and the best technique with this is just to realize that a thought is just a thought is a thought, and not to worry about controlling it, but just say, I entertain only good thoughts, or I give my energy to just good thoughts, is the best way. So mental toughness, what does it mean to you? And what does it mean to you to be mentally tough? Go ahead and type that in the bottom. I want to see some of these. What does mental toughness mean to you? Carrie said, not having negative thoughts, staying optimistic. Okay, that's about a different question. Okay. What does mental toughness mean to you? Like, some people would say, well, it means being resilient, but then what does resilient mean? But I'm talking about the mental aspect of this. And Kate wrote being resilient just as I said that, but I'm talking about from a mental standpoint, from a skill standpoint, what does mental toughness mean to you? So I got Karen, Denise, Christine, good. A lot of people from Hopkinton here. And being persistent on my positive thoughts and carrying them out. Good, Georgia. Staying strong in tough time, limiting emotional response. Good. Drown out and decipher what's going to move the needle versus what's drama. That's good. Yeah, that's really, there's a great book, Meredith, called The Signal in the Noise. Sometimes there is a signal in the noise, which is good too. That little voice we don't want to dismiss, but decipher what's going to move the needle. Good, versus the drama. Very good. Well, my definition for this, for mental toughness, is simply that you have the ability and you make it a habit. So one, you have the ability and you just make it a regular habit. I would say a person who's mentally tough has the ability, meaning they have the mindfulness, they have that awareness, but they have the ability and they make it a habit to not allow their brain to pull them down roads or pull them down paths or pull them down tracks, whatever adjective you want to use. They just don't allow their brain to pull them down paths that are counterproductive, that are just going to make them sick, that aren't going to work for them, that are just going to increase their stress. that just aren't going to be helpful, that are just going to make things worse than they already have to be. So you have the ability, and you make it a habit to not allow your brain to go down roads where you don't want to go down. Another great definition of mental toughness, some of you might recognize this gentleman, a psychopath by the name of Jared Loughner. And he shot this person, former Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords from the state of Arizona, at a constituent event several years ago and killed several people, including a federal judge. But the traumatic brain injury to the occipital lobe, it was a point blank right to the back of Gabby's head. Very traumatic brain injury, and really harmed her ability to speak and a lot of her motor functions, and eventually had to resign her seat in Congress. But the mental toughness example, which I just thought was amazing, was during the court sentencing, where they have the victim impact statement, where they're able to tell their impact of the crimes before he was put away. And it was her and her husband, John Kelly, the astronaut, who just looked. They were about 10 feet away from Mr. Laughter, and they just looked him right in the eye without fear. And he said, Jared, we want you to know before you go away in life in prison without chance of parole, Gabby and I want you to know that we are done thinking about you. And I heard that. I said, wait a minute, I'm cutting this out, this article. I'm putting this in the seminars, because that is just amazing. Because essentially what she's saying is, you actually blew some space out of my head, but I'm just not going to be giving you any space in my head. I'm not going to give you any space. And a great question to ask yourself is, what is your rental rate? What is your rental rate to give up space in your head? Do you make it easy for people to get a foothold in there? I love the quote, it's very hard to fight an enemy who has outposts in your head. And I'm just not doing it. I'm 51 now, and my teenage daughter was joking with me. At one point, she was accusing me of having, I think my other son was accusing me of having a midlife crisis because I was too involved with the baseball. And then Olivia piped in and said, wait a minute, that's not a midlife crisis. Has to be like a 60% crisis. So, I just don't know how many days I have left. I don't know how many years I have left. So I'm just not going to give up space inside of my head to counterproductive things. I'm not going to give space to this virus. I'm going to prepare. I'm not going to be irresponsible and not be ready, but I am going to ask myself, where is my line where my continuing to focus on this is now becoming counterproductive? And when Gabby Giffords and John Kelly said this to Jared Loughner, I think what they meant, and this is just paraphrasing, I don't think they meant that we're never going to think of you again and what happened, but I think what they were saying is, when we start to think about you, when thoughts come up about you, we're just not going to entertain them. We're just not going to go down that road. Just imagine you're at a train station. Imagine you're at South Station in Boston, since most of the people on the call, I know I got some from the West Coast, but most of you are on the East Coast. Imagine you're in the train station, and there's all these announcements for various trains going down track A, track B, track C, and you get on the train via thought. And if you get on the train to New Haven on track A, what mental toughness means is you notice it quickly. I'm on this train, which I don't want to be on. I'm getting off at the next stop. Then I'm going to come back to the station. If I find myself on this train again, I'm getting off at the next stop and I'm coming back to the station. That's really my definition of mental toughness. Of course, easier said than done, but what we want to do is, we just don't want to react to the mental activity. We just want to see it as mental activity. Oh, there we go again. We want to ask ourselves, the stuff I'm thinking, is it reality or is it just a thought? Your mental health is all on a scale. And I just love this t-shirt, don't believe everything you think. Great reminder, but our mental health is all on a scale between my thoughts represent reality. If I'm on the far left-hand side, I'm going to have a lot of mental health problems. And then you're healthier the more you're on the other side of the scale, which my thoughts are only thoughts. A thought is just a thought is a thought. So you know what? I'm not going to believe everything I think. It's just a creation of my brain. And so the next question, would you rather dismiss or would you rather dwell in this stuff? Now, if you dwell in it, few things will happen. You'll be upset. You'll be depressed. A therapist will love you and just go on and on and on, ruminating about the same stuff. And that's not going to be helpful. But if you want to dismiss, really the best news is the mental law of substitution, which is awesome. And the mental law of substitution really is the great news. And it just tells us only one thought at a time can be held by the conscious mind. So I can only hold one thought at a time. Now, this is hard for a lot of people to grasp because our brains shift very quickly and very rapidly, and the subjects change very quickly. But if it was like the old style movie reels, it really just is one frame at a time. And you can't not think about something. Like I can't say to everybody, I don't want anybody now to think about pink elephants, big, cuddly, fuzzy, furry, huggable pink elephants. But instead, I can think about blue monkeys. And this is why I love to say the joke whenever a tornado is bearing down on someone's community, everybody in that community has a wonderful marriage because no one's thinking about their marriage and how awful it is. They're thinking about the tornado and getting out. So just one thought at a time. So when I think about something else, when that thought has been substituted, has been replaced, the initial thought is now gone. So one technique you can use, which I use several times a day when I notice myself going down a road, cancel, cancel, cancel. I'm just not, no, not doing it. Cancel. Some people find it helpful to wear an elastic around their wrist where they snap it, but just to recognize quickly and not allow it to go down. Really, the gold standard is just to notice it, let it be in the background. So it's not as if people that don't have high stress levels or high anxiety levels or high depression levels don't have negative thoughts. Everybody does, because that's really what the brain does. But people that aren't as stressed or aren't as anxious, they just don't pay attention to them as much. They just don't entertain them as much. So the gold standard is just don't entertain them, let them be in the background. But when it starts to needle you, cancel can be effective for some people. Sometimes I think that might be even a little bit too much pugnacious, a little too much arguing with it. Some other phrases I like to say, and it works well for me to say, well, there's a thought. Oh, Kevin, you're over the hill now. You're 51. Well, there's a thought. My life is a disaster. Oh, my whole business is going to go under. Well, there's a thought. Hi again, anxious thought. A lot of times our thoughts are about the same thing, the same topic, the same subject. So sometimes it's good to name the certain subject matter. Oh, there's that same theme again. There you are again. Okay, there's the same anxious thought theme about that. And what you're doing is the catch and release technique. It's almost like you're playing flashlight tag. You're catching it as a thought, you're defining it as a thought, and then you just release it back out there. And it might come back again, but each time you catch and release it, it's less scary. It's less worthy of your attention. It's less front page news in the screen of your life or the screen of your brain, so to speak. And thank goodness that's just a thought. If you ever had the chance to wake up from a dream and say, thank God that was just a dream. Well, breaking news, the crazy, garbage, muddled, nonsensical dreams that your brain creates during the night, same thing happens during the day. Your brain comes up with this nonsensical, non-logical things and presents it to you as if it's concluded. It's a conclusion. There's the conclusion. This is the bottom line. It presents it to you like it's breaking news, but it's really just fake news. It's really just creations of the brain. And internal fake news is really the worst kind because it's personal, it's repetitive, and it's negative. Some other phrases that have really worked well for me is, you know what? I don't know that for sure. Oh, I don't know that for sure. I don't know if he's mad at me. I don't know if she's mad at me. People go nuts when their messages aren't replied to. Like, oh, they didn't reply to my text or my email. I don't know if they got it. All that is just speculation. I don't know if they got it. I don't know if they're too busy to respond, or maybe they are upset with me. Maybe they're not. Maybe they're having a family crisis. I don't know. It's just all speculation. But us human beings, we go nuts about not knowing, and we get very uncomfortable not knowing. Like if you say to people, hey, you're going to be quarantined till May 15th, people can handle that a lot better than just saying, we just don't know. We just have to let this run its course. People really struggle with that. But another one that's helped me a lot is maybe, maybe not. Maybe so and so is going to happen. Maybe it's not going to happen, but I don't know for sure. What evidence do I have? And how do I know for sure are two great ones that really work together. I have some bipolar runs in my family. I have an older brother who's bipolar who also has some paranoia, and he's convinced his neighbors come out when he goes out to his car to see what he's doing. And I keep saying to him, well, how do you know for sure? And he says, well, I just know. But what evidence do you have? Well, I just know. But wait a minute. How do you know for sure? And what evidence do you have? You really don't have the evidence. So, what we need to do sometimes when the thoughts are really repetitive and needling us, sometimes we can't ignore it. Sometimes we need to navigate right into the noise and discredit it. And sometimes what we need to do is we actually need to have a trial. And we need to have a defense attorney, we need to have a prosecution attorney, and you need to be the judge and see what is the preponderance of the evidence here. It's not beyond a reasonable doubt, but how does the evidence weigh out here? And you know what? Breaking news, there are certain rules for evidence in the court system. And you know what? A gut feeling or just a hunch does not count as evidence. That's not going to fly in the court system. So we're just looking at the really cold hard facts. So that's possible, but how likely is it is a good one? Because that doesn't deny and it doesn't dismiss. It just says, well, it's possible that may happen. Like even no one's really flying anymore, but say if you had a fear of flying, you'd say, well, that's possible my plane may crash next month, but how likely is it? So you'd have to look at how many flights are there per day and how many per day crash. And, that we have to come down. Now you've changed the question. Now you're talking about the percentages of that. I'll cross that bridge when I come to it, one day at a time. Another one of my favorites is that was then, but this is now. That was the past. That was then. This was now. And also, so what if? You just change what if to so what if is very helpful. Another type of pattern interrupt you can use is a visual. If you're more visual to catch yourself going down roads, you can see a stop sign, a road closed, a detour, and then you can quickly replace that picture with something that grounds you or something that centers you. And this is one I've been using for several years now. My oldest child, Olivia, now is 15, and there's really nothing I can say that's not obnoxious or irritating or annoying. And of course, I'm embarrassed in the way I look, the way I speak, the way I eat, the way I dress. And I'm told one day I did something wrong. The next day I do it totally the opposite, but then it's still wrong. But this is a picture back when Dad was still cool and Dad was still interesting and with the curly hair. And I specifically, when I was giving her baths, I wouldn't dry the hair. I'd just let it become curly. And just the pure potentiality of this, just happy, getting ready to go down the swing, getting ready to go down the swing of life. I think a lot of parents actually would love it if there was a time machine and they could just make their kid be any age just for a day and, sit on my lap and still think Dad is cool again. But this just brings a smile on my face. So I go from seeing the stop sign to seeing an image and this can interrupt my pattern so I don't go down those roads. And you can think of an image or a picture or something that works for you, but to be realistic with you and to be forthcoming, sometimes these techniques are not adequate. They don't work all the time. Sometimes we have something like this, which is a mental snowball. And a mental snowball is when you notice you start to think about one thing, and then that initial thought brings you sucked into something else, and then you're sucked into something else, and you're sucked into something else. It's like the mental equivalent of being stuck in the mud with your tires, and it just kind of grows. And classic mental snowball example I had from a few years ago. I had a participant in one of my sessions that said she has the same mental snowball every Wednesday night because her husband plays in a bowling league. And I thought, well, that's interesting. How does that grow? And she, well, the first thought is I look at the clock and say, well, he's 45 minutes late again. The next thought is, how could he do this to me again? The next thought is, haven't we talked about this a million times? The next thought is, I really don't deserve this kind of treatment. The next thought is, I knew I should have married that other guy in high school I was dating. This has just been such a disaster. I just have made so many mistakes. And the next thought is, you know what? He's probably at the neighbor's house down the street. The next thought, I'm going to wait outside their house. The next thought is, can I get, if I can prove infidelity, do I have to get an equal division of the marital assets? The next thought is, you know what? I don't know what I'd do without him. The next thought is, I hope nothing happened to him. The next thought is, maybe I should start calling the emergency rooms. The next thought is, I'm going to get a knock on my door very soon. And then the last thought was, OMG, oh my God, look at this house. This house is in no shape for a funeral, Let's get everything together. It's just, is that logical? Is that rational? Is that sensical? But it's not. But that's what we do to ourselves as human beings. We create these mental snowballs and we draw these conclusions and we run with them and get all upset with them. But I tell you, when it's repetitive, when like this, when it's a snowball like this, and when it snowballs, and this is on page 3 there of the handout, there's something about writing it down. Just something about writing it down. You got to get it out of your head. You got to get down it on paper. Sometimes I even dictate it on a laptop or on a Word document. So if you can just pull out on that handout there, page number 3, where it says activity, build a snowball. And it just says, write down one specific thing you're presently or recently or your most common mental snowball that you've been feeling anxious or stressed over. Write down the initial thought that comes to mind. Next, write down the next thought and the next thought. Keep extending your thoughts to an outrageous degree. This is really known as CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, which is based on the premise that how you feel is based on how you think or what you're thinking about. So I want to stop for a bit, give you a chance to write. This isn't going to feel good, but we're going to melt it in a moment. Just write down one thing you recently or presently have been feeling stressed or anxious about. If you don't have the handout, if you're an HCAM TV, just get a piece of paper and write down something you've been feeling anxious or stressed out repetitively that's been causing you some pain. And keep extending those thoughts. Yeah, as you're writing that, I just put the link to the Amazon to the book that this is based on. If you want to go into this further, Dr. David Burns also has a lot of good information on this, on mental snowballs. But it's just part of the human condition. You're going to find your snowball and things. But the other sad thing I find is a lot of people what they've been thinking about. A lot of the thoughts we're having today, we're going to have tomorrow. A lot of the thoughts we had yesterday, we're having again today. So it isn't until you do something different. There's something about writing out. It's been proven that it's really good for your immune system. They've done studies on this, a blood test, and asking people to write for 20 minutes at the end of the day, just what they're happy about in their life, what they're sad, what's going well, what they're frustrated about. It gives you a chance to express how you feel without fear of being judged with the writing. So it's very, very helpful to do that. And, we got to try something different, try something different this spring, let's be more mindful. Let's be more mentally tough this spring. And now that's, I know it doesn't feel good, but that is the writing of the mental snowball. And now the melting of it and what we can do to do a better job at melting this. And you have the bullet points there in that handout towards the bottom of page 3, but write it down so you can clearly see the distortion. And what is the distortion? This is the list. And if you have the handout, and again, if you're an HCAM, we'll get it to you. This is the list of the top 10 thought distortions. A fancy word for that is cognitive distortions, which cause us self-created pain or stress. Everything from jumping to conclusions to mind reading to all or nothing thinking, overgeneralization, mental filter, control delusions, emotional reasoning, discounting the positive, like the imposter syndrome, like all the things you've accomplished, like for some reason you think it doesn't apply to you, self-blame, labeling, personalization. Just circle which ones are ones, or make a note of which one or ones might be in the snowball that you wrote for yourself on page 3. Well, for some people, just looking at this list really is life changing. And they're able to say, darn it, that's what I do to myself. And that stops today. Overgeneralization, this always happens to me, or this never happens to me, or a lot of stuff that just causes us a lot of self-created pain here. So we have to tell ourselves, why is this fake news? How is it wrong? You have to be like Mr. Spock on Star Trek. You'd say, Captain, that's not logical. Tell yourself why it's not logical. Be your own judge. Be the arbiter here. To try to decide between the defense attorney and the prosecution attorney. So speak up, talk back, poke holes in the logic, come up with counter arguments, just as if you're in a debate or a trial. It really is a debate or trial between the voice on one of our shoulders, which is the sky is falling, everything's a disaster, and then the other shoulder, hey, everything's going to work out. Pull out factual examples from your past. Ridicule the opposition, break the pattern, break the cycle. Like pull out factual examples from your past where you ever overcome similar things, whether it's a health concern or a financial concern or whatever the concern there is, a family concern. A lot of times I find we do discount all of the amazing things that we've overcome and overcome the things that we've accomplished. So that's how you melt it. So the goal here is now on page number 4. Can you write out a response now? Or if you don't have the handout, just take a separate piece of paper and look at what you wrote to build the mental snowball. Now, what can you write back to yourself to melt it? What logic or reasoning can you use? If you also want to put a column in the middle, put a line down the middle, make 2 columns, and say, this is the evidence for that this thought is real, and this is the evidence that the thought is not real. Plus, minus, for or against, and how does it balance out? How does it even out? But go ahead and write out a response that will melt that snowball, at least take the power away from it. Even if you can't find a cognitive distortion, even if you say it's the God gospel truth, maybe you'll say back to yourself something like, you know what, I just can't afford to think this way. Thinking this way or going down this road does nothing but to make it worse for myself and everyone around me who loves me. So go ahead now and take a few moments and write out a response to that. So Anjana from out there in California, able to write out the answer, able to melt that snowball? Go ahead and unmute.
Hi, Kevin. Sorry, I missed it.
Were you able to melt the snowball?
Sorry, I missed that slide for a second. I had to attend to my baby.
Okay.
Sorry.
It's just that I think what most people will do is they'll just ruminate. They'll just stay in their head. They'll never really make the effort to define it. Like, what is it exactly? Why am I upset? Why am I stressed? What do I think is going to happen? You got to peel the layers of that onion and say, what is the core? And you might be very surprised once you find out what the core issue is with it. You can be a lot of good information with this that you can find, but that's really the goal, is to try it, do something different. And that is the mental snowball melt. And that's a big part of mental toughness. It's not always going to be an easily dismiss or an easy ignore. Sometimes you need to navigate right into it and discredit it, to shut it up. And there really is 3 P's you want to avoid with anxiety and depression, because you can easily go from a low grade anxiety or a low grade depression to a big one if you blame yourself, if you make it personal, if you see yourself as the problem. That is, if you internalize the problem. If you think it's all pervasive, if the problem is affecting all aspects of life, you're going to struggle with this. And if you think it's permanent, if you see the problem as unchangeable, you'll go from a low grade to really a clinical debilitating depression or anxiety disorder. So you want to avoid those 3 P's. You want to be able to say, you know what, there's probably a contribution percentage. May have contributed to the problem, but it's not 100% my fault. It's not every aspect of my life or every aspect of my job or every aspect of my marriage or every aspect of my family, or I don't hate every part of my body. It's not all pervasive. And also, this too shall pass. It's not permanent. But if it's your fault, everything's bad, and you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, you're really going to struggle with a lot of these things. So that is the 3 P's of depression. And if you have any questions on that element of it, the next element of navigating the noise is just to ignore. It's just to quiet it. It's just to turn it off. So now this isn't so much as a negative as a positive, responding to it, ignoring it. But what this really is the whole concept of brain training, calming the brain, quieting the brain. If you want to use the phrase meditation, that's fine, but we're all going to need to do that this spring. We're going to need to do this in April. We're going to need to do this in May. because you're going to notice a lot of your thoughts. You know, what's amazing too is that story of that soccer team that got stuck in the caves in Thailand. And you know, they were everybody remembers the rescue effort, but what people forget was the 9 days before they were found. What do you think was going on with these kids and their minds and their thoughts? It was dark, it was cold, there was no food, they didn't have any contact. They didn't, am I going to die here in this cave? But thankfully, the soccer coach had a lot of meditation experience. And when they were found, they were quietly meditating just to calm themselves, to conserve their energy, to not let their brain go down roads they don't want to go down. And this exercise of meditation really does help you learn a different relationship with your thoughts. And unfortunately, a lot of meditation experts or gurus have really muddied this and made this more confusing than it has to be by bringing a spiritual connotation or linking finances to this and joining this or that group or whatever. But really, just a scientific definition of meditation is just the cessation or the marked reduction of mental activity, just to lower the mental activity. And just I think a lot of us would admit, yes, we think too much. Just the thoughts are going too much. We just think way too much. And a lot of us are kind of looking for a switch between our ears just to be able to shut this brain down. But this is amazing. This really gives you a firewall between the virus, work, annoying situations, other people, like a firewall, a defense wall. So these things just don't get into your core and take away your peace of mind. And also, there was a great study on this, if you want to Google it, from Dr. Sarah Lazar in Mass General. I think I got Susie here today on the training session or on the broadcast here from Mass General, where they took a group of meditation naive subjects, and half of them meditated several times a week for a couple of weeks. I think it was 6 to 8 weeks, and the other group didn't. And they took brain scans before and after. Definitely noticed a marked improvement, increased gray matter and thickness of gray matter in certain regions of the brain that deal with perspective, decision making, and calm and rational thinking, just through meditating a couple times a week for several weeks. Just like if I did bicep curls, if I was training those muscles a couple times a week for several weeks, that would change the structure of my biceps, also changes the structure of your brain. And then the very bright red sickle shaped structure there, right in the center, right at the base of the brain stem above the vagus nerve, there's called the amygdala, which is the part of our brain which is responsible for the cortisol release and the fight or flight response, among other responsibilities. But that part of the brain actually shrunk through doing these brain exercises. So one of the best things you can do for yourself, and the number of scientific papers that have been written over this the last couple decades are just amazing. So the way that you do this is you just want to just imagine you're sitting there and all these clouds above your head are various thoughts. And this thought is my finances, the virus, my family. What am I going to do this spring? And by the way, when is my son's baseball season going to start? Is AAU baseball season that we've paid thousands of dollars for? This one could be, you know, I got tickets to the opening day of the Red Sox. When is that going to happen? All these just various thoughts, but just training you to understand you are not your thoughts and your thoughts are not you. There's a separation here. But what you also want to do is just realize they come and they go. Just when they come, don't run away from them. When they leave, don't chase after them. Don't argue with them. Here's what we don't want to do. We don't want to give it energy, go back and forth and say, no, I shouldn't think that way. That's not true. Come up with a counter argument. No, that is not this exercise. It's just letting them stay there. It's not letting them go. It's doing what Paul McCartney said and what the Beatles said. And what did Paul McCartney and the Beatles say? They didn't say let it go, but they said let it be. So you just let them be. Just let them be there. Just don't immerse yourself in them. The other thing you can do is you can actually now measure your brain waves. They make portable EEGs, electroencephalograms, and this is what I use now to help me measure how I'm doing. I mean, we can measure physical activity. We can measure the number of calories I burn. We can measure how long I ran on the treadmill, the number of reps of weights I lifted. We can also measure for a 10-minute period with not an EKG here, not electrocardiogram, not the heart, electroencephalogram, EEG, real-time neurofeedback, and you can see how you did. And this is a device called Muse, MUSE, and it just fits over my head just like some earphones, and it just connects to my phone via Bluetooth technology. So I used to think I was meditating, but I really wasn't. I was just kind of neutral. My brain was not calm enough. So this example, January 6th at 4:30 for 10 minutes, it wasn't really that effective. I only was calm. Out of the 10 minutes, my brain was only calm for 2 minutes and 48 seconds. The rest of the time, I was just kind of just contemplating various things. I wasn't active, but much better. I did this again 10 minutes later or so, around 4:43. Now my brain was calm for 6 minutes and 32 seconds. And these points here with the orange circles, this is the recovery point. I want to be towards the calm waves. I also want to change the frequency of my brain waves. I want to have less beta brain waves, and I want to have more alpha or more theta brain waves. And you can see on the bottom here with the green, that's when my brain was calm for a good 10 seconds here, the little green stripes. And as it gets up to the top, to the active, the top row, I started to think about something essentially. And then I noticed it and it came back down. I returned back. That's my recovery point. So I like to think of this as repetitions. It was just a rep. I just noticed it and came back. I noticed it and returned. I noticed and came back. Just like I'd be proud of myself if I did 50 reps of barbell, little jerk and clean hold. I could be proud of the 50 reps I did with the noticing and returning here because I'm getting better at it and getting better at it. So what you want to do is simply just sit there, just be. Don't expect it to be perfect, just be gentle. Give yourself permission to not have to figure anything out right now. This is not my time to figure anything out. I can just sit, I can just be. Find a quiet place with no interruptions. Easier said than done, but have a focal point to place your attention. So a lot of different focal points. Could be a guided tape, an imagery, could be listen to something. A lot of physicians nowadays are trying to teach their patients doing mindful meditation and say visualize the white blood cells killing the cancerous cells or killing the virus cells, the invading cells. And then but what I'm going to do with the people that are new on the call here and on the broadcast, what I usually do is have people just pay attention to your breathing. The breathing is the one thing you're going to have until the very end of your life. To your very last breath, you're always going to have your breathing. And we also always have our thoughts. So what we do is we take our attention and put it on our breath. Notice what it feels like as we inhale and our lungs fill up with air. And then notice what it feels like as we exhale and our lungs collapse, and make this be the focal point. Where do you feel it? Down low by your diaphragm muscle, up high by your nose and nostrils. And then when thoughts arise, which are normal and natural, just gently catch yourself and gently return back to the focal point. You don't say, "Oh, you stupid idiot," or "You're not going to be able to do this," or "What's wrong with you?" Oops. You just say, "Oops, there. Let me come back to the breathing." Oh, there's another thought. Let me come back to just gently keep noticing and returning. Grasp that the thoughts are seductive. They're vying for your attention and they want to draw you in. Just don't let them. And understand you never stop your mind. You just notice and return. Just notice and return. So let's just go ahead and do this for a bit. Let's just go ahead and let me get this off the screen, and you could just look at me. Just go ahead and sit up straight in the back of your chair and close your eyes. That's all you have to do. Sit up straight and close your eyes and just start to take some slow, deep breaths, but place your attention on the process of the breathing and ask yourself, where do you notice it? Down low by your diaphragm, up high by your nose and nostrils. And just make this be your focal point where you place your attention. And it's normal. Thoughts are going to pop in. Just notice the thought and just return. Just notice and return here. Just keep noticing and returning just for a few moments here. Don't let the thoughts suck you in. Just keep keep returning to the breathing. And just 1 minute left. Okay, now I'll have you open your eyes and come back to me. Hope that felt good and felt different. I just think there's no scenario this spring where you're going to be able to have a sense of peace of mind and inner calm and inner peace without doing something like this. Even when you're dreaming, even when you're sleeping, the brain is active, especially during the REM, rapid eye movement stage of sleep. Cortisol is being released. You're getting scary dreams and the heart's pounding. When does your mind ever rest? When does your brain ever truly rest? And there's some studies that suggest doing this for 20 minutes and really calming the brain and getting those brain waves down to an alpha or theta frequency is equivalent to X number of hours of really good restorative sleep rest. It's just amazing. The health benefits to this are amazing. But if you have any questions on that, on quieting the noise and meditating, certainly put that in the chat. And not very often do we do that. Not very often do we do that on live TV, but certainly I think that's good. And that's really a big part of the exercise we want to do. But the other thing I wanted to do with everybody here is the other part of navigating the noise, which is creating your own noise, which is actually rewiring. And rewiring the brain, which is fascinating. And actually, even before I get to that, there's 1 or 2 slides left here before I get to rewiring. If that focal point of paying attention to the breathing is not adequate enough, you can also visualize a word, or visualize a phrase, or say a certain phrase to yourself. And what can be helpful for a lot of people is while they're inhaling, say to yourself, this breath, and as you're exhaling, now. This breath, not yesterday, not tomorrow, not next week. This breath, this inhalation, this breath, now, right here, right now, as you exhale. This breath now, this breath now, this breath now. Another thing you can do is count backwards. Something about counting backwards. It's more relaxing for us to count down as opposed to counting up. So you can make it be a little math. You can have every inhalation could be an even number. You can count down by 3. Inhale 250, exhale 247, inhale 244. What comes next? I don't know. Exhale 241, exhale 241. But this is better than what's wrong with my life and how it has to be fixed. I mean, this isn't necessarily as relaxing as the first exercise, but it does train your brain to focus better. So that's some other ways that you can quiet the noise. And now creating your own noise, rewiring the brain. And the best news for this is the neuroplasticity. The brain becomes the shape of what it rests on, and the brain is malleable. It can change just by thought and what you do. And this is really called self-directed neuroplasticity, which is really the most exciting news. And the best news is we can change our brains, and you become what you think about most of the time. If you think most of the time about how awful things are and how stressful your life is, the law of attraction has been proven over and over again. You become that, you attract that, you see more of that. That just becomes more prominent. And also, what you expect with confidence becomes your own self-fulfilling prophecy. Whatever you think is going to happen with confidence, you attract that, you create that. And part of the reason why is that neurons that fire together wire together. So, just a quick background: we have about 5 or probably not even 5, 10, 20, 30 billions of neurons in our brain, with all these different dendrites going off the neuron body that connect to other neurons. So the way this works is that as soon as you start to think about a certain topic, think of your brain as this really complicated, mangled string of lights. And as soon as you start to think about a certain topic, a particular one, say that's the blue string will light up. But the more you think about that particular subject matter or that line of thinking, or whether it's worrying about your elderly parent, the more easily that blue string will light up and the brighter it becomes. Also, the bell analogy, it's like, say, your emergency bell, your red alert bell. The more you're in red alert, the easier your bell rings and the louder it rings. But the louder and the more often the bell rings, the easier it trips again. So it just kind of creates that. It reinforces these things because the neural structure, neural networks that are more well traveled are just simply more efficient. They just attract more traffic onto that network or that path or that road. Another analogy that you can use for this is imagine the road. I believe this is the HCAM Bridge in Boston. And just imagine you actually do rewire. You rewire every night. And during our very particular cycle of sleep, the brain improves the roads or the paths that get the most traffic and takes away from the ones that don't get as much traffic. And if it gets no traffic at all, if that neural path isn't used, it goes through a process called neural pruning, and there's the rewiring right there. That path is pruned. But just imagine that there is a fixed amount of asphalt, and every night the asphalt gets reallocated. So whatever roads get the most traffic, that road gets improved during the night. More lanes, the road is widened and it's improved. It's made smoother. It's made straighter. So it's easier for cars to go on. That becomes a super highway. The problem is sometimes we got some of these roads, they're just super highways for depression and addiction and other problems. But say, imagine some of the more minor roads out here to the left or some of these overpasses. Say that road might be the road or the amount of time that you spend or the pathway about what you're grateful for in your life or what's going well in your life or what you feel as though is awesome in your life. And that particular pathway doesn't get much thought or doesn't get much attention. So there's not much traffic on that. So it's much more narrow. Unfortunately, for some people, that pathway is just a dirt road with a lot of lines in it. You can only go 30 miles an hour. But if it's a nice straight highway, you can go 70 miles an hour. So it's almost like getting a rut in a mud road. You just more easily fall into the rut. So what a lot of us need to start doing to rewire our brains and to overcome this negativity bias is we actually have to make conscious effort to redirect some traffic on a different road, to redirect some of the traffic on a road that you want to be on, the road of how you'd like things to go and how you'd like things to be. And those of you that have the handout, just skipping a few pages, and I'm just on page number 6 now about rewiring the brain, and just some questions on there. There's 3 questions on a scale, and there's the right hand side and the left hand side of the scale. And the first question on the top is what you don't want. And what you ask yourself is how frequently do you focus on or think about what you don't want? Say if this had to add up close to 100%. And what's the flip side? What's the opposite side of the scale on the far left-hand side? Of course, it would be what you do want. But what percentage of the time are you focused on what you don't want? And what percentage of the time are you focused on what you do want? And talking about the little league and the coaching, I tried to instill some of these things. I was coaching in the Sizzler tournament over the summer. I was trying to instill with some of these kids. I'd ask these kids, well, how do you want this at bat to go? Well, a lot of them would say, well, I don't want to strike out. Well, is that what you do want? Is that what you don't want? You see, you don't want to strike out. So you're focused on what you don't want. So trying to turn that around, saying, I want to put a good swing on the ball. I want to hit the ball hard, or I want to get a base hit. Try to focus on what you can control. Next question is, how often you focused on how you don't want things to go or how you don't want things to go and happen? And then what's the flip side to this, which is, of course, how you'd like things to go, how you'd like things to be, or how you'd like things to happen. Next question is how things could be improved, how things could be better. And lots of us are focused on this. I could be in better shape. I could make more money. My house could be cleaner. My kids could be better behaved, or I could have less stress in my life, or I could get my teeth whitened, just a whole list of things and how things could be improved. But what is the opposite side of this scale? Well, it's how awesome my life is right now. With nothing being changed, this is how awesome my life is right now, just the way it is. How often do you focus on that or think about that? Try to put those numbers on the top of page number 6 there on those percentages. Because when we think about rewiring, this is really all about the emotions, and it's about your ratio of positive experiences to negative experiences. A lot of people feel as though to be a resilient person, you have to have a 3-to-1 ratio at least of positive experiences to negative experiences. And what I mean by experiences is I mean feelings. How are you feeling? What is it a positive emotion or is it a negative emotion? Because whenever you've been scared, whenever you've been frightened out of your wits, that makes a stamp your brain. stamps that on your hippocampus, and your brain wants you to remember that, so you'll won't make that mistake again. Some of you might remember that example of the Supreme Court nominee, which was Brett Kavanaugh, and the hearings that they had with when he was going into the Supreme Court. And I think the person that was testifying, her name was Christine Blasey Ford from California. She was a great witness. She was a psychologist, and she said, you know what? It was just indelible in the hippocampus. And the hippocampus is the part of our brain that holds the memories. It was just indelible in there. I can't tell you how I got to the party. I can't tell you how I got home. All I can remember was him laying on top of me laughing, and I just remember that image, and I know it was him. And yes, because that brain really wants to stamp that in deep in your memory. I can remember in grammar school being bullied and being afraid, and my heart pounding, and going down the line and trying to avoid the line and avoiding certain kids. And I think that caused me a lot of problems, and I had to really spend some time rewiring. So it's really all about the experiences. It's not about the things. A lot of times we think we want these things because of the experiences that it's going to give us. Like a lot of people say, what do you want? Well, I want to win the lottery. Well, why do you want to win the lottery? So I don't have to worry about money anymore. So is what you really want, not to worry about money? So can you just go ahead and go on the offense? You see, the brain is very much on the defense, and the brain really wants to prepare for the impending doom and gloom. But very rarely do people get up. And sometimes it's even best to do this first thing in the morning. You get up, close your eyes, and there's something about smiling, because when you smile, it starts to release what? Well, it starts to release the natural opioid, starts to release the dopamine, and starts to release the endorphins. And your brain doesn't know if it's a legitimate, genuine smile or if it's a forced smile. You just start to smile, and that's like the fake fire. That's like the fire starter. It gets the fire going, and then you'll start to feel it. You'll start to feel it. But what a lot of us need to do is we need to play a better scene. We need to go on the offense and ask ourselves, how would I like things to go? How would I like things to be? What would actually excite me? What would calm me? What would make me feel grateful? What would feel neat? What can I do to change this emotional state around? So, in other words, I'm going on the offense now. We're very good at being on the defense. We're very good at having negative emotions and creating negative experiences by just what we think about. And even if you think about the concept of worry, worry is when you're thinking about a future event and feeling negative experience, negative emotions about it, because you're thinking about it exactly the way you don't want it to turn out, but as if it's already so. And you're scaring yourself. So now what I'm saying is I'm challenging you to do the exact opposite just for 5 minutes. Is just think about how you'd like it to go, the end result, as if that end result is already so, and play that video and see it. And unfortunately, we're not so good at playing videos anymore because of YouTube. All the videos are made for us. And back before there was television, all there was radio. Back when FDR was doing his fireside chats, and radio was really known as the theater of the mind, because you had to create these pictures and these images as you were listening. You'll also notice when you're reading a book, you probably create the pictures and create the images. But I want to challenge you here on page number 6. It says, what would your offensive vision statement or video be? What could you start to visualize? What would your video be about? Because again, you're the executive producer and the creator over what scenes play on the screen of your mind and what scenes you give energy to. But what would be in your video? What would calm you? What would excite you? What would make you feel exhilarated? And if you're struggling with this, ask yourself, well, what does exhilarated feel like? And try to feel that. So let me pause for a moment. And if you don't have page number 6, just write it down wherever you find some space there. What would be a scene you'd like to play for yourself that would make you feel pumped and motivated and excited? What would you be doing, and see yourself in that picture? I had one person last week who said, I just want to get, she had just given birth. She said, I just want to get back to a size 6. So I said, you see that. You see yourself in the size 6, feel the emotions that go along with that. See yourself at the beach, when all this is over this summer, and feeling confident, feeling secure in your body, feeling grateful for all the work you did. But, if you don't have the emotion, then there's no trace that there was ever any traffic on that road. And this is the part I screwed up, is I never brought enough emotion into it. And then Scott, I don't know which Scott you are. I know a few Scotts. Just send me an email about the recording to this, and I can get that to you. I think you had put that in the text. Even Albert Einstein said, imagination is more important than intelligence. So what you can imagine, and you take the word imagine and break it in half, image in. So can you imagine or image in exactly what it is you want to manifest in your life? See it and picture yourself in the picture with vivid detail. Not only see it, but feel the emotion that goes along with it. Absolutely. That's absolutely what you want to do. So what is your offensive vision statement? What is your anchor statement? Absolutely good to look at. The other thing we want to do is, some of you might have heard of it, the psychology of savoring. And what that is when something good happens, when something special happens, when something happens to you during the day that makes you smile, savor that. And what that means is you just stay with it for about 10 seconds. You smile through that, because again, with the negativity bias, the brain doesn't want to stick with that. The brain just wants to quickly go on with something else. So when something good happens, whatever it is, those little things, if you stay with it and bring some emotion to that, you're going to start to get some neural structures going to be created. Some neurons are going to fire and wire together if you can stay with it for at least 10 seconds. A lot of us, we're not getting enough neural structure because the brain just wants to, what's wrong, what's going to happen, don't you understand, you got to get ready, we're going to be hit with this, we're going to be hit with that, and your brain does not want to stay on this stuff. So it could be your dog is excited to see you, it could be a hug you get in the morning, it could be eating something good that tastes good, whatever it is, a sunrise, a sunset, just stay with that. Keep bringing that in there. The other thing you want to do is ask yourself better questions. You're always going to get a better answer. Ask yourself, what are you grateful about in your life right now? And what about that makes you grateful? How does that make you feel? What are you excited most about in your life right now? What about that makes you excited? How does that make you feel? What are you enjoying most in your life right now? What about that do you enjoy? How does that make you feel? What are you proud about in your life right now? And the what about that makes you proud? This creates like a positive mental snowball now. Now the opioids, the natural opioids, are being released, and your brain's going to like this. The brain is definitely trying to avoid harms, but it's also trying to get the carrot too, and not just avoiding the stick. So your brain will start to look for this, and slowly your brain, the rewiring, it's like compound interest. It happens slowly, but slowly your brain will start to rewire. And I don't want to make any false or misleading claims. I think actually that company Lumosity got fined by the FTC a couple $1 million by saying, rewire your brain by doing these exercises, within a month or two. It takes some time, but when your amygdala starts calling for less cortisol, when your amygdala is less sensitive and less active, you're a new person. You're just not as a reactive a person. You're not as stressed of a type of person. You laugh more. You're more in the moment. You're more mindful. You're happier. And what happens with addiction, when you take a foreign substance, when you take unnatural opioids, your brain gets the signal up, plenty of, I'm flooded with opioids. I don't need to make any opioids now for 6 months. I got so many opioids going on right now. And then you stop taking the artificial opioid, and then you just feel so darn low because there's no natural opioids. You just feel like absolute garbage, and then you just feel addicted. So it really hijacks the brain and hijacks the pleasure centers of the brain. And this is really how you see the splendor. This is how you see the gratitude in life, is you ask yourself these questions. And that's really a lot there on navigating the noise. So we did ignoring the noise, we did when it starts to needle you, kind of getting it away and pushing it away, kind of like slamming the mole, whacking the mole. Then we did navigating into the noise to discredit it, have the trial, have the two lines there. We also did quieting the noise and meditation. And then we also did just say, heck, create your own noise, create the noise that you want to have, make things be the way that you want them to be. So that was a mouthful, but let me unmute everybody and open it up now. See if we have any questions or any comments or anything people want more information on.